November 24th, 2024. A moment frozen in time. Millions watched as Bishop T.D. Jakes delivered a powerful sermon, his voice echoing through the Potter's house. But then, without warning, his words cut off. The microphone slipped from his grasp, crashing onto the stage. A hush fell over the congregation. His towering presence wavered, his body trembling. His eyes rolled back, his skin drained of color. Gasps filled the air. Some dropped to their knees, others lifted their hands in desperate prayer. Panic spread like wildfire. Ushers rushed forward. A doctor in the front row bolted from her seat. In the chaos, the live stream continued, broadcasting every chilling second to 2.3 million viewers around the world. What had happened? Was this exhaustion? A spiritual attack? A medical emergency? No one could say. But as paramedics stormed the sanctuary and a stretcher rolled in, one thing was clear. This was just the beginning of a shocking and untold story. On June 9, 1957, in the small town of South Charleston, West Virginia, Thomas Dexter Jakes was born into a world of hard work and perseverance. His parents, Ernest and Odith Jakes, believed in the power of dedication. His father, a determined businessman, built a successful janitorial company from the ground up, employing over 40 workers and securing contracts with major buildings, including the state capitol. But even success could not shield the family from hardship. When T.D. was just 10 years old, his father was diagnosed with kidney disease, a battle that would stretch on for years. As his father's health declined, T.D. found himself taking on responsibilities far beyond his age. He spent long nights at his father's bedside, watching and learning the weight of suffering, the fragility of life, and the power of resilience. In the midst of this pain, something stirred in him, a deep sense of purpose, though he didn't yet understand what it was. While other kids spent their days playing outside, T.D. found comfort in his Bible. He carried it everywhere, flipping through the pages, searching for answers, for hope. This obsession earned him the nickname Bible Boy among his peers. But he didn't just read scripture, he preached it. In the privacy of his bedroom, he lined up his stuffed animals and spoke to them as if they were a full congregation, pouring his heart into sermons only they could hear. Yet, the weight of his father's illness bore down heavily on the family. By the time T.D. was 16, the inevitable happened. His father passed away, leaving behind a business, a grieving wife, and children forced to grow up too soon. The loss shattered him. For the first time, he found himself questioning everything, including God. Why had this happened? Why had his prayers gone unanswered? The grief was unbearable, but it was also transformative. It set him on a journey that would define the rest of his life. In the wake of his father's passing, life became even more difficult. His mother fell ill, forcing T.D. to make a heartbreaking decision. He dropped out of high school just 2 months before graduation to care for her. The pressure of responsibility weighed heavily on him, but even in the darkest moments, something inside him kept pulling him toward a higher calling. At 23, that calling became impossible to ignore. He took a leap of faith and started his first church, a tiny storefront in Montgomery, West Virginia, with only 10 members. There was no grand cathedral, no massive audience, just a small room filled with folding chairs and a young preacher with a fire in his heart. He called it the Greater Emmanuel Temple of Faith. Life as a pastor was anything but easy. Money was tight, and to keep both his family and his ministry afloat, T.D. took on a job at a local chemical plant. By day, he worked long, grueling hours. By night, he poured his soul into his sermons. His wife, Sarita, was his rock, supporting him, encouraging him, and helping to build their small church from the ground up. She worked as a Christian radio DJ, using her platform to spread the word and draw people in. The church was far from glamorous. There were no polished pews, no grand choir. TD himself played the piano for worship services because they couldn't afford a musician. On Easter Sundays, he would joke that if they counted everyone, including pregnant women and the dearly departed, the congregation might reach 40 people. But numbers didn't matter. It was the message that drew people in. TD had a gift, an ability to take the struggles of everyday life and weave them into sermons that spoke to the soul. He didn't just preach about faith. He preached about pain, about resilience, about overcoming impossible odds. And people listened. Slowly but surely, the small church began to grow. By 1983, he held his first conference. Only 80 people attended, but it was a glimpse of something greater on the horizon. What started as a humble storefront ministry would soon become something unimaginable. But in those early days, T.D. Jakes had no idea what was coming. He only knew one thing. He was called to preach, and he would keep going, no matter what it took. In 1996, T.D. Jakes made a decision that would change his life forever. He packed up his ministry and moved to Dallas, Texas. It was a bold leap of faith with no guarantee of success. But something inside him told him this was where he needed to be. With just 50 families from his small West Virginia congregation, he started over, launching the Potter's House in a rented building. The first service drew 300 people. Within 6 months, attendance skyrocketed to 5,000. Word spread like wildfire. This wasn't just another church. This was a movement. The rapid growth was unlike anything he had ever seen. People came in droves, hungry for a message of healing and hope. The sanctuary overflowed with worshipers, standing room only. Every week, more and more seats had to be added. It became clear the Potter's House needed a permanent home. In December 1996, Jakes made a historic move. He purchased a massive 28-acre property for $3.2 million, a site that had once belonged to another pastor, but now held the promise of something new. On opening day, over 8,000 people packed the building, spilling into overflow areas. The energy was electric, but the vision didn't stop there. The growth continued at a staggering pace. By 1999, the Potter's House had 20,000 members. Sunday services were standing room only, with multiple services just to accommodate the crowds. By 2000, it was time for another leap of faith. Jakes launched the construction of a $45 million sanctuary. It was an architectural masterpiece, 191,000 square feet, built to house 8,000 worshipers in a single service. Every detail was intentional, designed to create an experience that blended faith with excellence. And the most remarkable part, the church paid off the debt in just 4 years. By the early 2000s, the Potter's House was one of the fastest-growing and most diverse churches in America. It attracted people from every race, background, and walk of life. The message of faith and transformation resonated far beyond the walls of the sanctuary. It was no longer just a church. It was a movement touching lives across the nation and around the world. But Bishop T.D. Jakes' impact wasn't confined to the pulpit. His voice reached far beyond Sunday sermons. He understood the power of media, and he used it to spread his message like never before. In 1993, he released a book that would change everything. Woman, Thou Art Loosed. It was more than a book, it was a movement. The message of healing for broken women resonated deeply, and the book became a bestseller, selling over 3 million copies. It remained on bestseller lists for 75 weeks, solidifying Jakes as more than just a pastor. He was now an influential author. But he didn't stop at books. Jakes saw a bigger vision. In 2004, Woman, Thou Art Loosed became a major motion picture, hitting theaters nationwide. The film, produced under Jakes' own media company, grossed $6.8 million at the box office. It proved that faith-based films could be successful and profitable. Hollywood took notice. Soon, Jakes was producing more films, Jumping the Broom, Heaven is for Real, and Miracles from Heaven. Films that collectively earned over $100 million worldwide. He had successfully bridged the gap between faith and entertainment, proving that spiritual stories could thrive in the mainstream. At the same time, his television presence expanded. His show, The Potter's Touch, reached millions globally, airing on networks across the US and beyond. Whether through TV, radio, or online streaming, his sermons were accessible to audiences worldwide. But his influence wasn't just limited to faith and entertainment. Politics also took notice. Over the years, Jakes became a trusted advisor to multiple US presidents. From George W. Bush to Barack Obama and even Donald Trump, leaders sought his guidance on issues of faith, race, and community development. A defining moment came on January 20, 2009. As the world watched history unfold with Barack Obama's inauguration, it was Jakes who led the morning prayer service for America's first black president. It was a moment that symbolized his influence, not just in the church, but in shaping national conversations. By the 2010s, T.D. Jakes was more than a preacher. He was a best-selling author, a filmmaker, a television personality, and a sought-after thought leader. He had built an empire that extended far beyond the walls of the Potter's house. Yet, with great influence came great scrutiny. And as his empire grew, so did the voices of his critics. T.D. Jakes' message of faith, success, and personal growth captivated millions. His sermons were powerful, his presence undeniable. But not everyone was convinced his teachings aligned with biblical truth. Critics claimed he had strayed too far from the gospel, turning faith into a formula for wealth and prosperity. The accusations were clear. Was T.D. Jakes preaching the Word of God, or was he selling success? Some believed his sermons focused too much on material blessings, promising that faith and obedience would lead to financial gain. Statements like, "If you obey God, you will never be broke another day in your life," fueled criticism that he was promoting the prosperity gospel, a belief that God rewards faithfulness with wealth and success. Critics pointed to his lavish lifestyle as evidence. Reports surfaced about his multi-million-dollar mansion, luxury cars, and designer suits. To some, it was proof that he was living off the donations of his congregation. Others defended him, arguing that a pastor's financial success didn't necessarily mean corruption. Jakes himself responded by saying he built his wealth through books, films, and business ventures, not through church offerings. But theological debates extended beyond money. For years, Jakes faced scrutiny over his views on the Trinity. Early in his ministry, he used the term manifestations instead of persons when describing the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. This language sounded similar to modalism, a belief that God does not exist as three distinct persons, but instead reveals himself in different forms at different times. The controversy exploded in 2012 when Jakes appeared at the Elephant Room Conference. Pressed on his views, he affirmed belief in one God, three persons, but then stated he still preferred the term manifestations. His answer left many confused. Was he affirming traditional Christian doctrine, or was he trying to appease both sides? Even after his statement, suspicions lingered. His church's website continued to use manifestations instead of persons, raising further concerns. Some conservative theologians argued that his vague wording allowed him to avoid outright rejection from traditional churches while still holding to unorthodox beliefs. Through it all, Jakes maintained that his faith was rooted in Scripture. But the criticism never fully faded. To some, he was a leader guiding millions toward spiritual and financial empowerment. To others, he was a preacher, blurring the lines between biblical truth and motivational self-help. If theology was one battleground, social issues were another. T.D. Jakes's views on LGBTQ+ topics changed over the years, sparking both support and outrage. In the early 2000s, Jakes made it clear he saw homosexuality as brokenness. He suggested that it stemmed from childhood trauma, absentee fathers, or abuse. His stance aligned with conservative Christian beliefs at the time, reinforcing the idea that same-sex attraction was something to be fixed. But as the years passed, his tone shifted. In 2015, during an interview, Jakes surprised many when he said that the Black church and the LGBTQ+ community can coexist. He emphasized that every church and every individual had their own journey. Some saw this as a progressive move, a sign that he was becoming more accepting. The backlash was swift. Conservative Christians accused him of compromising biblical truth. Progressives questioned whether he had truly changed his views or if he was simply trying to appeal to a broader audience. The criticism forced Jakes to clarify. He stated that while he welcomed LGBTQ+ individuals into his church, he did not support same-sex marriage. By 2021, his focus had shifted. He criticized white evangelicals for prioritizing issues like abortion and same-sex marriage over racial justice and poverty. This further distanced him from traditional conservative circles while earning praise from activists who believed the church needed to address systemic inequalities. Then, in a 2022 sermon, Jakes spoke about changing gender roles in modern society. Though he didn't directly address LGBTQ+ issues, his message signaled that he was willing to challenge long-held views. For some, these shifts made him a bridge between faith and cultural change. For others, they confirmed their fears that T.D. Jakes was moving further from biblical principles. Whether viewed as a progressive leader or a preacher who lost his way, one thing was certain: his stance on social issues made him a polarizing figure in the church. Then, in 2024, T.D. Jakes found himself at the center of a legal firestorm. A lawsuit rocked the entertainment industry, and his name was caught in the fallout. On March 25, 2024, record producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones filed a bombshell lawsuit against music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. The lawsuit contained shocking allegations against Combs, but what stunned many was a claim buried on page 47. It mentioned T.D. Jakes. According to the lawsuit, Combs had planned to use his connection with Jakes to repair his public image. This revelation sent shockwaves through both the church and the entertainment world. How was T.D. Jakes involved? What exactly did Combs mean by connection? Jakes and Combs had crossed paths before. In 2021, Jakes's Kingdom Culture sermons aired on Revolt TV, a network founded by Combs. In 2022, Jakes attended Combs's lavish birthday celebration. The two had been seen together at high-profile events, but was there more to their relationship? Speculation ran wild. Rumors surfaced, alleging that Jakes had attended private parties hosted by Combs. Others claimed Jakes was being used to whitewash Combs's reputation amid growing allegations. For weeks, Jakes remained silent. His refusal to immediately respond only fueled more questions. Then, on April 15, 2024, he finally addressed the controversy from the pulpit. Speaking before thousands of worshippers, he dismissed the allegations as slanderous lies meant to destroy his name. He insisted he had no involvement in Combs's legal troubles and warned that his ministry was under attack. But he didn't stop there. 3 days later, on April 18th, Jakes filed a $100 million defamation lawsuit against Rodney Lil Rod Jones, claiming the lawsuit's claims had caused irreparable harm to his reputation. He also went after online platforms that spread the rumors. On May 2, 2024, he filed separate lawsuits against multiple YouTube channels, each demanding $50 million in damages. He accused them of using AI-generated content to spread falsehoods. To prove he had nothing to hide, Jakes took unprecedented steps. He assembled an independent board of church leaders and legal experts to review his financial records and personal dealings. He publicly released church documents and even took a polygraph test, the results of which were shared with the public on July 15, 2024. Despite his efforts to clear his name, the controversy left a mark. Some believed he was unfairly dragged into a legal battle he had no part in. Others questioned whether he had gotten too close to the entertainment elite, blurring the line between ministry and celebrity. Whatever the truth, one thing was undeniable. 2024 was shaping up to be one of the most challenging years of his life. And just as he was fighting for his reputation, an even greater crisis was about to unfold. Then, the unthinkable happened. On November 24, 2024, Bishop T.D. Jakes stood before a congregation of thousands at the Potter's House in Dallas. His sermon, titled Strength in Weakness, had gone on for nearly an hour, his voice filled with passion and authority. Millions more watched online, hanging on to every word. But suddenly, something changed. Mid-sentence, his voice faltered, his breath became labored. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, and then silence. The microphone slipped from his grasp, the sound of it hitting the floor echoing through the sanctuary. His towering frame trembled, his eyes rolled back, his skin turned a sickly gray. For a brief moment, he seemed to struggle, as if his body were fighting against an unseen force, and then he collapsed. Gasps filled the air. Some leaped to their feet, others froze in shock. Prayers erupted from the crowd, voices rising in desperation. Some wept openly. Others called out his name, willing him to respond. But Jakes lay motionless, his body limp on the stage. Chaos spread through the room. Ushers rushed forward. Medical personnel in the audience sprinted to his side. Among them, Dr. Mariah Stevenson, a cardiologist sitting in the front row, immediately checked for a pulse. Her face turned pale. "Call 911. Now!" Marcus Washington, head of security, activated the church's emergency response plan, Operation Shepherd's Staff. The sanctuary, packed with over 12,000 worshippers, had to be cleared. Within minutes, 3,000 people were ushered out, making way for paramedics. At the same time, an usher, Sarah Martinez, sprinted to retrieve the AED defibrillator. She reached it in under 30 seconds. Every second mattered. Every heartbeat, or lack thereof, was crucial. The live stream, still rolling, captured every moment. Social media exploded. Pray for T.D. Jakes began trending worldwide. Speculation ran rampant. Was it a heart attack? A stroke? Something worse? 4 minutes after his collapse, paramedics arrived. They worked quickly, stabilizing him with emergency medication and setting up an IV. Time was against them. Jakes needed advanced medical care, and fast. That's when a life-saving decision was made. The church's private helipad, installed just over a year ago, became critical. Within moments, a medical helicopter touched down outside the sanctuary. Jake's was loaded in, the rotor blades slicing through the air as it lifted off toward Methodist Dallas Medical Center. The flight lasted just 7 minutes, but to those watching, it felt like an eternity. No one knew what would happen next. The world held its breath. What followed was nothing short of a battle for life. Jake's was rushed into emergency surgery the moment he arrived at the hospital. The diagnosis: a severe cardiac event. His heart had stopped, and only immediate intervention had saved him. But the fight wasn't over. For the next 9 hours, a team of top surgeons worked tirelessly. The damage was extensive. They performed multiple procedures, each one a delicate attempt to stabilize him. During surgery, he required 47 blood transfusions. His body had been pushed to its limits. Every second in the operating room was a test of endurance for both him and the doctors working to save him. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, something remarkable was happening. Thousands gathered in prayer vigils outside the Potter's house. Social media flooded with messages of hope and faith. Celebrities, world leaders, and pastors from across the globe sent their support. Inside the intensive care unit, Jake's lay unconscious. For 17 days, he remained in critical condition, monitored around the clock by a team of specialists. Machines beeped steadily, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. The world waited, hoping for good news. Then, on December 18, 2024, the moment came. A video call from Jake's, his first public appearance since the collapse, was broadcast to his congregation. His voice was weak but steady. His message was simple: "I am still here." The response was overwhelming. That single message sparked a wave of support, raising over $4 million for the hospital's cardiac unit. It was a testament to the impact he had, not just as a pastor, but as a leader whose influence stretched far beyond the walls of his church. But his journey was far from over. Recovery would be long and grueling. Physical therapy, strict dietary restrictions, and cutting-edge medical treatments became his new reality. He worked tirelessly, determined not just to survive, but to return stronger. Even from his hospital bed, he refused to be silent. Dictating to an assistant, he began writing "Reborn," finding strength in life's valleys. It was a story of resilience, faith, and redemption. When it was released just months later, it became an instant bestseller, selling over 2 million copies in its first week. And then, on New Year's Eve, 2024, something extraordinary happened. Against all odds, T.D. Jakes returned to the pulpit. Over 18,000 people packed the Potter's house. Another 11 million watched online. He stepped onto the stage, thinner, visibly changed, but filled with the same fire that had driven him for decades. His sermon, "The Comeback King," was more than a message. It was a declaration, a testament to faith, to perseverance, to the belief that even in life's darkest moments, there is always a way forward. The crowd erupted in applause. Some wept, others cheered. He had faced death and returned, not just as a preacher, but as a living testament to the power of faith and resilience. The journey had been long. The battle had been brutal. But one thing was clear: T.D. Jakes was far from finished. Even as he lay in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines, his body weak from the battle he had just endured, Bishop T.D. Jakes refused to slow down. For most, surviving a life-threatening crisis would have been enough. But for Jakes, survival wasn't the finish line. It was the beginning of something new. He could have chosen to rest, to step back, to focus solely on his recovery. Instead, he did what he had always done. He turned his pain into purpose. With a voice still recovering and movement restricted, he dictated every word of what would become his most personal and powerful book yet. Reborn, Finding Strength in Life's Valleys. It was raw, honest, a deeply personal look at the valleys of life, the struggles, the doubts, the moments of suffering that test faith and character. He didn't just write about survival. He wrote about transformation, about the kind of pain that refines rather than destroys. The book was unlike anything he had ever written before. It wasn't just a sermon on paper, it was a testimony. And when Reborn hit shelves, the response was immediate. In its first week alone, the book sold over 2 million copies. It topped bestseller lists worldwide. Readers saw themselves in his words. They saw their own struggles reflected in his journey. And they found hope in the idea that setbacks don't have to be the end. They can be the beginning of something greater. As he continued to recover, his schedule was filled with physical therapy sessions, medical treatments, and hours of rehabilitation. He was rebuilding himself, step by step, just as he had rebuilt his life so many times before. But there was one moment he had been waiting for, a moment that would mark his true return. He wasn't just going to write about resilience. He was going to stand before the world and prove it. Then, on New Year's Eve, the moment finally arrived. For weeks, there had been whispers. Would he come back? Could he come back? Would he ever step onto that stage again? The questions were answered on December 31st, 2024. The Potter's House filled beyond capacity. Over 18,000 people packed into every seat, with thousands more standing outside, watching on massive screens. Online, the numbers climbed. 1 million, 5 million, 10 million. By the time the service began, more than 11 million people were watching from around the world. And then, the doors opened. The room fell silent as T.D. Jakes stepped onto the stage. He looked different, thinner, slower in his steps. The toll of his journey was visible, but his presence, the fire in his eyes, the authority in his stance was unchanged. He took a deep breath, gripped the microphone, and then, with the power of a man who had walked through the valley and come out the other side, he spoke. "You thought I was finished? You thought this was the end? Let me tell you something. Our God is not a God of endings. He is a God of resurrections." The room erupted. People jumped to their feet, tears streaming down faces, voices rising in praise. His sermon, The Comeback King, wasn't just another message. It was a declaration, a battle cry, a reminder that no setback, no illness, no attack, no struggle could stop a person walking in their purpose. For nearly 2 hours, he preached with the fire of a man who had been tested and refined. He spoke of pain, of endurance, of a faith that survives the storms. And when he finished, he stepped back from the podium, lifted his eyes to the heavens, and whispered, "I'm still here." In that moment, it wasn't just T.D. Jakes who had returned. It was hope. It was faith. It was proof that no matter how dark the night, morning always comes. And for T.D. Jakes, this was only the beginning of his next chapter. Through every victory, every battle, and every challenge, one constant remained: his wife, Sarita. Their love story began in a small church in West Virginia. It was 1982. T.D., just 23, was preaching as a guest minister. In the congregation sat Sarita, 26, a woman who would soon become the foundation of his life. Their connection was undeniable. Within 6 months, they were married. It wasn't an easy journey. Money was tight. Their dreams were bigger than their bank account. But together, they built a life rooted in faith, commitment, and perseverance. As his ministry grew, so did their family. 5 children. Sarah, Cora, Jermaine, Thomas Jr., and Jamar filled their home with laughter, love, and, at times, the struggles that come with being in the public eye. But family life wasn't without challenges. In 2009, the Jakes family faced a painful public moment when their son, Jermaine, was arrested for indecent exposure. The headlines were brutal. The criticism was relentless. For any family, a moment like this would be difficult. But for the son of one of the most well-known pastors in the world, it was a storm like no other. Jakes, however, responded not as a preacher, but as a father. He stood by his son, offering love, guidance, and forgiveness. It was a test of faith, not just for him, but for his entire family. Despite the challenges, their bond remained unbreakable. Sarita, always by his side, became a leader in her own right. She ran women's ministries, supported the church, and provided a steady foundation for their home. Through financial struggles, ministry pressures, and public scrutiny, their love endured. And as they celebrated over 40 years of marriage, Jakes often called Sarita his ride or die, his anchor in the storm, his partner in every triumph and every trial. T.D. Jakes had changed the world, but in doing so, the world had often taken him away from his own family. As the Potter's house expanded, as books turned into bestsellers, as movie deals and global conferences filled his schedule, something had to give. Jakes had always been a man of immense responsibility, but with that responsibility came sacrifice. He preached multiple services every weekend, traveling to conferences, meeting world leaders, writing books, producing films. His work schedule was relentless. The calling on his life was clear, but at times it came at a personal cost. In one interview, he admitted to a regret that haunted him. He had missed his son's high school graduation. He wasn't absent out of neglect, but because duty had called. Ministry had demanded his time. And though he had dedicated his life to helping others, it sometimes meant missing moments that could never be repeated. There were birthdays celebrated without him, school plays where his seat remained empty, and countless nights when his family wished he was home instead of standing before thousands. Even his wife, Sarita, had faced moments where the weight of his ministry felt heavy. In 2012, she underwent surgery for a herniated disc. During her recovery, T.D. was forced to slow down. He was reminded of something he had always known, but had too often put on the back burner. Family is the foundation of everything. It was a lesson learned through experience. And in recent years, Jakes had made a conscious effort to shift his priorities, to be more present, to cherish the moments that truly mattered. Because even the strongest leaders, no matter how powerful, how influential, how anointed, face sacrifices. And for T.D. Jakes, the greatest lesson was this: success means nothing if the ones you love the most aren't there to share it with you. At 67, after decades of preaching, writing, and transforming lives, the question remains, what's next for Bishop T.D. Jakes? For many, this would be the time to slow down, to step back, to reflect on a lifetime of accomplishments. But for Jakes, stepping back has never been an option. His vision for the future is bigger than ever. His focus has expanded beyond the pulpit. While faith remains at the core of his work, he is now deeply invested in building long-term solutions for economic empowerment, education, and community development. One of his most ambitious ventures is his foundation's $1 billion partnership with Wells Fargo. Together, they are working to create new opportunities for underserved communities, providing affordable housing, job training, and financial education. Jakes has also turned his attention to leadership development, ensuring that the next generation is equipped with the tools they need to succeed. Through his International Leadership Summit, he brings together entrepreneurs, faith leaders, and business executives, offering them guidance on how to lead with purpose and integrity. His real estate initiatives are making a tangible impact, with major housing projects designed to help working-class families build stability. His foundation has also committed millions to criminal justice reform, workforce training, and scholarships for students who may have never had the opportunity to pursue higher education. But through it all, one thing remains unchanged: his passion for ministry. He continues to preach, to mentor, to inspire. His sermons still draw massive crowds, his books continue to break records, and his presence in the world of faith-based media is stronger than ever. For T.D. Jakes, legacy is not about what he has built, it's about what he leaves behind. And as he moves into the next phase of his journey, his mission is clear: to empower, to uplift, and to create lasting change for generations to come. Few figures in modern faith have left a mark as profound as Bishop T.D. Jakes. To some, he is a visionary, a leader who turned a small storefront church into a global movement, a man who used his voice to inspire millions, who redefined what it meant to be a preacher in the 21st century. To others, he is a controversial figure, one whose teachings have sparked theological debates, whose success has drawn criticism, whose influence has been both celebrated and scrutinized. But whether you love him or question him, one thing is undeniable: his impact. From humble beginnings in West Virginia to standing before presidents, from preaching in small churches to filling stadiums with tens of thousands, from facing intense criticism to overcoming personal battles, his journey has been one of faith, resilience, and reinvention. His story is not one of perfection. It is a story of struggle, of triumph, of setbacks and comebacks. A story of a man who refused to let circumstances define him, who believed that faith could move mountains, and who proved that no matter how far you fall, you can always rise again. And so, as he stands once more at the pulpit, delivering his comeback sermon, the message is clear: this is not the end. This is only the beginning. A life of faith, a legacy that endures.